Most people never get rich, not because they're incapable, not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they overlook a principle so simple, so quietly powerful, that it slips right past them in the noise of daily life. This principle isn't buried in some secret vault or held back by a privileged few. No, it's in plain sight. It's in your mind, in your thoughts, in the way you choose to direct your life each day. You see, the world is filled with hard-working men and women. They rise early, they do what's expected of them, they follow the rules, and still most of them will never reach financial independence, let alone true wealth. Why is that? It's not for lack of effort. It's not for lack of information. The truth is more fundamental than that. They miss the root, the foundation. They miss the cause behind the effect. They chase money but ignore the law that governs its appearance. They want the fruit without ever understanding the seed. You and I live in a world governed by laws, laws of physics, laws of nature, laws of the mind. And one of the most powerful laws ever discovered by man is this: we become what we think about. That's it. That's the key. Not what we wish for, not what we occasionally daydream about, but what we consistently think about. The dominant thought in our mind becomes the blueprint for our reality. This isn't philosophy. This is practical, observable, and verifiable. Yet most people, despite living in a world of abundance, never take control of their thinking. They never stop to ask, what do I really believe about money, about work, about myself? They drift through life, letting environment and circumstance shape their beliefs, and those beliefs shape their results. They're good people, honest people, but they never realize they've been programmed by media, by tradition, by fear. And until that programming is rewritten, the result will always be the same: struggle, scarcity, frustration. Let me ask you, what do you expect from life? What kind of financial outcome do you genuinely believe is available to you? Not what you hope for, not what you say when you're feeling inspired, but what you expect. Because your expectations set the limits of your reality. If you believe wealth is for other people, you will unconsciously find ways to push it away. If you believe money is hard to earn, you will sabotage the opportunities that come easily. If you believe that success must come with exhaustion and burnout, you'll resist ease and flow even when it's offered. Your mind is a magnet, a powerful instrument that attracts ideas, people, circumstances, and yes, even money in alignment with your dominant thoughts. That's not a metaphor. It's a law, like gravity. And here's the test. Take a look at your current results, your income, your environment, your daily routine. They are all mirrors, reflections of the thoughts you've planted, nurtured, and allowed to grow. But don't be discouraged. Be awakened, because the moment you realize this truth is the moment you take back the reins of your life. You don't need permission. You don't need a new degree, a new boss, or a new economic policy. What you need is a new mental blueprint, a new set of beliefs about wealth, service, value, and possibility. That's the lever that moves the world. And anyone, regardless of background, age, or education, can begin today. All it takes is one decision: to take full responsibility for your thinking, to guard the doorway of your mind like a sentry, to feed it only the ideas that align with your vision, not your fear, because your future is being programmed by the thoughts you allow to dominate your mind today. If you want wealth, you must first think wealth, not from greed, not from vanity, but from understanding. Understanding that wealth is a result of value given, of contribution made, and of belief sustained over time. You see, the wealthiest individuals in the world didn't stumble into fortune by accident. They weren't lucky, they were intentional. They decided what they wanted. They built a mental picture of that life, and then they began to act in alignment with that picture. Every day, consistently. While others drifted, they directed. While others complained, they created. And they started exactly where you are now, with a decision, with a vision, with a refusal to let their mind be shaped by default. That's the beginning of all transformation. The decision to think deliberately, to believe intentionally, to stop living reactively and start living creatively. Because the mind left alone will revert to fear. It will regress to safety. But the mind, guided by vision, becomes the most powerful force in the world. Now consider this. If you were to think only thoughts of abundance, service, and contribution for the next 30 days, if you were to refuse to entertain any idea of limitation, lack, or fear, what would happen to your life? That's not a rhetorical question. That's a challenge, a scientific experiment with your life as the subject. The answer? Everything would begin to change. Slowly at first, then faster. You would notice new ideas, new people, new energy. Why? Because you're now in harmony with abundance. You've aligned your inner world with the laws that govern the outer world, and make no mistake, those laws are always in operation. You don't need to believe in gravity for it to pull you down, and you don't need to believe in the law of mind for it to shape your future. But if you do believe, if you do align, then you move from struggle to flow, from scarcity to abundance, from hope to certainty. That's the difference between the rich and the poor. Not intelligence, not luck, not effort, but alignment. The rich think in terms of cause and effect. They ask, what thoughts, beliefs, and actions will lead to the result I desire? The poor think in terms of chance and blame. They ask, why isn't life fair? Why don't I have what they have? And the tragedy is this: they could change, they can change, but they won't, until they change the way they think, until they accept the truth that most people never discover. The outer world is a reflection of the inner world. Your wealth is a mirror of your thoughts. Your bank account is a reflection of your beliefs. Your opportunities are echoes of your expectations. And once you understand this, once you truly see it, you'll never be the same again. You'll never be passive again, because now you know you are the cause. So write this down, not on paper, but in your mind. Etch it there. I become what I think about. I create my wealth through thought, belief, and action. I take full responsibility for my results. This is the beginning. This is the seed, and it must be watered daily, with repetition, with intention, with faith. You cannot plant a seed today and expect a harvest tomorrow, but plant it you must, water it you must, because the law is guaranteed. The mind properly directed will always yield fruit, and the fruit will match the seed. That is why most people never get rich. They plant seeds of doubt, seeds of fear, seeds of limitation, and then wonder why the harvest is small. But not you. Not anymore. Now you see, now you know, and with that knowledge, everything changes, if you choose it. Most people never get rich because they never stop to define what wealth truly means to them. They chase vague images, expensive cars, grand houses, exotic vacations, without ever questioning the source of those images. Who told them this is what wealth looks like? Was it a commercial, a social media post, a fleeting glimpse into someone else's life? Without clarity, there can be no destination, and without a destination, there can be no direction. You see, wealth is not simply the accumulation of money. Wealth is the freedom to live on your own terms. It is the ability to serve others without desperation. It is the security of knowing you are not at the mercy of circumstance, but the master of your own financial ship. Most people never get rich because they chase symbols, not substance. They want the result but haven't taken time to define the cause, and so they run fast, hard, tirelessly, but in circles. Let me tell you why this matters. Because until you define what wealth means to you, you will keep chasing someone else's definition, and that's a race you can never win. The moment you set your own standard, your own vision of financial independence, contribution, and peace of mind is the moment you begin to build something real, something tailored to your life, your values, your dreams. That kind of wealth, true wealth, is built deliberately. It is built from the inside out. And that's why we must begin not with goals, but with vision, with clarity, with purpose, because a man with a clear purpose will find a way. A man without one will find an excuse. So I challenge you, take time today to ask yourself, what does wealth look like to me? What does it feel like? What kind of life would it allow me to live? Until you can answer those questions with conviction, the map will remain foggy and the path unclear. Now here's where it gets interesting. Once you've defined your vision, the next step is alignment. This is where most people fall off track. They write goals, they make lists, they get inspired, but then they return to the same routines, the same environments, the same thought patterns, and so nothing changes. Why? Because you cannot plant new seeds in old soil and expect different fruit. You must change the environment of your mind. You must clean out the weeds of doubt, fear, laziness, and begin planting new intentional thoughts. You must surround yourself with people, books, and ideas that reinforce the future you're building, not the past you're escaping. This is not theory, it is biology. The mind creates neural pathways through repetition. Thought becomes belief, belief becomes action, action becomes habit, and habit becomes destiny. Most people never get rich because they keep returning to mental environments designed for survival, not success. So what do you do instead? You build a new mental blueprint. You repeat it daily. You immerse yourself in it. You write it down, speak it aloud, visualize it as already real. And you act every single day in alignment with that future. Not someday, not when it's convenient, now. Because here's the truth. The mind doesn't respond to what's real, it responds to what's dominant. It responds to what's repeated with emotion. If you dwell in fear, your mind will find ways to validate that fear. If you dwell in abundance, your mind will scan the environment for opportunities, ideas, and connections that match that abundance. Most people never get rich because they never command their mind. They let it wander. They let it react. They let it be shaped by television, by gossip, by limitation. But you must do something different. You must train your mind like a craftsman trains his tools. I want you to think of your mind as a machine, a precision instrument. It runs on instructions, your instructions. If you program it with doubt, confusion, and fear, it will produce exactly that. But if you program it with vision, clarity, and discipline, it will produce outcomes you never imagined possible. The key word here is program, because no one escapes programming. The only question is, who's writing the code? Is it you or is it the world? Most people never get rich because they let the world write their mental code. They inherit beliefs from parents, culture, and media, beliefs that were never examined, only accepted. But wealth requires examination. It requires intention. It requires you to pause, reflect, and ask, does this belief serve me? Does this pattern lead to the life I desire? If the answer is no, then change it. Not someday, now. Let me give you a truth that very few will tell you. Money is not mysterious. Money is not emotional. Money follows law. The law of value, the law of service, the law of belief. Money flows to those who solve problems, who serve with excellence, who believe deeply in their right to receive. Most people never get rich because they misunderstand money. They see it as something to chase, rather than something to attract. And attraction is not magic, it is alignment. When your thoughts, actions, and identity all match your vision of wealth, money becomes a byproduct, not a pursuit. This shift is radical, and it changes everything. Instead of desperation, there is calm. Instead of stress, there is focus. Instead of greed, there is contribution. Because you no longer seek to get money, you seek to create value. And money is the natural effect of that cause. Here's a test for you. Ask yourself, what is one belief I currently hold about money that might be limiting me? Be honest. Write it down. Then ask, where did this belief come from? Who taught it to me? And is it true? Not emotionally true, not familiar, but objectively true. You'll be surprised how many of your financial beliefs were inherited, not chosen. Most people never get rich because they never perform this audit. They never clean the mental house. They live with outdated programming rules that served their ancestors in times of survival, not abundance. But today you have a choice. You can upgrade the code, you can write a new script. And when you do, you begin to experience what very few ever do: financial clarity, financial control, financial growth. Not overnight, but inevitably. The most powerful shift you can make is to move from victim to creator, to move from blaming to building, from waiting to working. And this work begins in the mind. It begins in your morning thoughts, in your spoken words, in your attitude toward the tasks before you. Most people never get rich because they underestimate the power of the unseen. They focus on tactics but ignore mindset. They study marketing but ignore belief. They seek leverage but lack internal structure. But success is a house, and mindset is the foundation. Without it, the structure collapses. With it, you can build as high as your faith will allow. So don't just change your habits, change the root. Don't just work harder, work wiser. Don't just try more, think differently. That's the real breakthrough. That's the shift that builds empires. Let me give you an image. Imagine two men. One wakes up each morning and asks, what do I feel like doing today? The other wakes up and asks, what must I do today to become who I've decided to be? One is governed by emotion, the other by vision. One is reactive, the other is responsible. Now ask yourself, who will build wealth? Who will gain freedom? Who will command their own time, their own resources, their own life? The answer is clear, because wealth is never accidental. It is always a reflection of values in action. Most people never get rich because they have no internal compass, no standard, no identity strong enough to resist the noise of comfort. But those who build wealth, they decide. And once they decide, their lives begin to arrange themselves in alignment with that choice. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. Because the universe responds to clarity, and life begins to move for the man who moves with conviction. You see, there's a false idea circulating in the minds of the many that life should be easy, that struggle is a sign something is wrong, that challenge should be avoided at all costs. This idea is not only wrong, it's dangerous, Because wealth is not built in ease, it's built in clarity and cost. It costs time, it costs energy, it costs you your old self. You cannot take the habits of a consumer and expect the life of a producer. You cannot think like an employee and build like an owner. These identities are not compatible. Most people never get rich because they refuse to cross that line. They want success while remaining familiar. But success is a different country, and the currency there is sacrifice. You must give up the small to claim the great. You must release your grip on the average to climb toward the exceptional. And yes, it will hurt, but the pain is not punishment. It is the process, and on the other side of that process is freedom. Most people never get rich because they spend their lives avoiding the very thing that builds wealth: sacrifice. Now, I don't mean sacrifice in the sense of misery or lack. I mean the intelligent, intentional trade of something lesser for something greater. Wealth is not simply earned through time. It is earned through decisions. Decisions to delay pleasure, to invest rather than consume, to build rather than distract. Every wealthy person you'll ever meet, every success story that seems impressive on the outside, carries within it a history of quiet discipline. Decisions made when no one was watching. Early mornings, late nights, weekends repurposed for the long game. Most people never get rich because they seek comfort. But wealth does not live in comfort. It lives in purpose. It lives in commitment. It lives in the fire of trade-offs. And until a person understands this, until they willingly walk away from the short-term pleasure in favor of long-term fulfillment, they will continue to live in cycles of scarcity, frustration, and envy. So the question is not, can I become wealthy? The question is, am I willing to pay the price? And the price is not measured in dollars. It's measured in decisions. Are you willing to cut off distraction? Are you willing to be misunderstood while you build? Are you willing to show up day after day with no applause, no recognition, no guarantees, only the quiet knowing that you are becoming more? This is the test. This is the fire. Most people never get rich because they fail this test in silence. They give up not with a bang but with a whisper. They tell themselves stories. It's not the right time. I'm not ready. Maybe later. But later becomes never, and potential rots into regret. But those who pass the test, they rise. Not all at once, but certainly. And when they rise, they carry with them not just wealth, but wisdom, the kind of wisdom that only comes from sacrifice. Let me be direct. Wealth is not something you get. It's something you grow into. It's not something you stumble upon. It's something you become. And to become wealthy, you must shed the identity that keeps you broke. The identity that needs approval, that seeks comfort, that demands ease. You must become someone else. Someone with a stronger mind, a clearer vision, a deeper reservoir of discipline. Most people never get rich because they try to add success to who they already are. But the real path is subtraction. Removing the traits that sabotage, removing the habits that distract, removing the thoughts that limit. This is not glamorous work, it's not exciting, but it is essential. Because who you are determines what you do, and what you do determines what you receive. Wealth is a mirror. It reflects your mindset, your discipline, your sacrifice. Here's a truth few will tell you. You will either sacrifice for your vision or sacrifice your vision. There is no middle ground. Time will pass either way. The only question is, will it pass in alignment with your goal or in avoidance of it? Most people never get rich because they sacrifice their future to protect their feelings. They don't feel like working, so they don't. They don't feel inspired, so they wait. But the wealthy, they move anyway. They understand that feelings are fleeting, but vision is forever. They act on principle, not on mood, and that single distinction makes all the difference, because while the masses are waiting for motivation, the successful are stacking bricks day after day, brick by brick, until one day they look up and see a fortress, a life built with purpose, a structure too solid to be shaken by circumstance. Let me leave you with this image. Imagine you're holding a scale. On one side is your goal. On the other side is your current identity. If the scale tilts toward comfort, the goal remains distant. If the scale tilts toward discipline, the goal begins to draw near. Every choice you make, every thought you think, every action you take adds weight to one side of the scale. And over time, the scale will tip. It always tips. The question is, which way? Most people never get rich because they forget this law. They think in days, not decades. In moods, not movements. But wealth is a game of tipping the scale. And those who master that game, those who show up consistently, sacrifice wisely, and think long-term, they win. Quietly, powerfully, inevitably. Most people never get rich because they underestimate the power of value. They spend years trying to find shortcuts, waiting for luck, hoping for some external event to transform their circumstances. But the truth is, wealth flows to value, and value is something you create. Not someday, but now. It begins with a simple question: what problem do I solve? Who do I help? What result do I deliver to the world that is so clear, so useful, so consistent that others are willing to exchange money for it, freely, eagerly, and repeatedly? You see, money is not emotional. It is not mystical. It's a certificate of value, a byproduct, a mirror of your contribution to others. Most people never get rich because they reverse the order. They chase money before they develop value. But the equation is simple: contribution first, compensation second. Just like a seed must be planted before the harvest, so must value be created before wealth can appear. Let me ask you something. What skill have you mastered so deeply that someone would gladly pay for it without hesitation? Not just because it's rare, but because it's transformational. If you can't answer that, you've found the bottleneck. Most people never get rich because they spread their energy thin. They become jacks of all trades but masters of none. But the wealthy, they go deep. They choose a skill, a craft, a discipline, and they refine it to the point of excellence. They understand that the world rewards clarity and mastery, not noise, not dabbling, but precision, focus, discipline, and that's the shift, from being busy to becoming valuable, from doing more to doing what matters, because it's not about how many hours you work, it's about what those hours produce. The market doesn't pay for time, it pays for results, and the better the result, the higher the reward. Now, here's a principle I want you to write down. Your income is always trailing your value. Always. There is a delay, a gap, a period where you're planting, refining, building, and the world hasn't yet noticed. Most people never get rich because they quit during this gap. They stop when the applause is missing. They abandon the process before the compounding begins. But wealth is like a glacier. It builds beneath the surface, slowly, silently, until one day, without warning, it breaks through, and suddenly the world calls it overnight success. But it wasn't overnight, it was earned. Layer by layer, hour by hour, through unseen acts of service. So if you're in that gap now, don't despair. Don't pivot out of boredom. Don't chase a new trend. Double down. Go deeper. Become so valuable that the world cannot ignore you. That's the real secret. Not luck, not timing, but value that compounds. Let's take this further. Value isn't just skill, it's also identity. How do you carry yourself? What energy do you bring into a room? Do you elevate others? Do you solve problems or create them? You see, people don't just pay for knowledge, they pay for certainty, for clarity, for leadership. And most people never get rich because they never step into that identity. They hide, they wait for permission, they lower their voice to avoid standing out. But the wealthy, they lead, they take responsibility, they own their voice. They don't just know things, they live them. That's the edge. That's the shift from ordinary to exceptional. When you become the kind of person others can trust, when your presence brings calm, confidence, and clarity, you become magnetic. Opportunities appear, networks open, compensation increases, not because you demanded it, but because you became it. Now consider this. Most people underestimate how long it takes to become truly valuable. They want a result in weeks, but mastery takes years, not decades, but years of focused, uninterrupted effort. The good news, very few people are willing to do this, which means if you truly commit, you instantly separate yourself from the masses. You rise not because you're better, but because you're disciplined. Most people never get rich because they look for new before they've finished old. They start and stop, start and stop. But the successful, they finish, they stay, they endure, and that's what makes the difference. Not brilliance, not luck, but follow through. If you want to become wealthy, fall in love with the process, with practice, with progress, because every hour invested in value creation is an hour added to your future freedom. Here's a truth that very few understand. Wealth flows through perceived value, not just objective value. You may be great at what you do, but do others know that? Can they see it? Most people never get rich because they keep their gifts hidden. They believe their work should speak for itself. But in today's world, clarity of communication is part of the work. You must articulate your value. Package it, present it, make it accessible. That's not arrogance, that's service. Because if your gift can help others, and they don't know it exists, who suffers? They do. That's why you must learn to communicate, to sell, to market. Not because you're chasing approval, but because you understand this. The value you create is only as powerful as your ability to deliver it to the world. And that's where the bridge is built, from obscurity to opportunity, from silence to scale, from effort to earnings. Let me tell you a story. There was a man who spent years perfecting his craft. Day after day, he worked in silence. But he told no one. He sold nothing. He built no bridge to the world. And so, despite his brilliance, he struggled. Not because he lacked value, but because he lacked visibility. Eventually, he gave up, thinking the world didn't care. But the truth? The world never knew. Now contrast that with the man who not only builds his value, but also shares it boldly. He writes, he speaks, he teaches, he gives, and slowly, steadily, the world begins to respond. Not all at once, but with momentum. That man, he builds wealth, not because he's more talented, but because he's more willing. Willing to be seen, willing to be misunderstood, willing to offer his value freely, knowing that in time it will return multiplied. Most people never get rich because they hide what should be shared. So where does this leave you? It leaves you with a question: what value do I bring to the world? And how can I deliver it at scale? Because scale is where leverage lives. And leverage is the engine of wealth. When your value can impact one person, you earn a living. When it can impact 1,000, you earn a fortune. And in today's world, through technology, through media, through systems, that scale is available to anyone. Not just the elite, not just the chosen few, but to you. If you'll build, if you'll share, if you'll stay. That's the game. That's the law. That's why most people never get rich, and that's why you will. Most people never get rich because they never develop a clear, unshakable financial philosophy. They move through life with vague beliefs about money, some inherited, some absorbed from culture, few ever examined. They say things like money isn't everything or rich people are greedy, without realizing these statements aren't just words, they're mental locks, and each one reinforces a ceiling. But here's the truth. Money, like any tool, is neutral. It's not good or bad, it simply amplifies the person who holds it. A generous person becomes more generous. A fearful person becomes more controlling. Money is a magnifier, not a corrupter. Most people never get rich because they hold beliefs that repel wealth. They see ambition as greed. They confuse humility with poverty. They moralize lack and demonize abundance. And until that internal framework changes, until a person builds a healthy, powerful financial philosophy, they will always self-sabotage the very thing they claim to desire. Let me be clear, you are allowed to prosper. In fact, you're meant to, but prosperity doesn't just happen. It's not a mood, it's a mindset. It's a structure. And that structure begins with a decision. I will live in alignment with the laws that produce wealth. I will think clearly. I will act responsibly. I will give more value than I take. I will respect money as a symbol of service, not as a god, not as a villain, but as a mirror. Because that's what it is, a mirror of your belief, of your order, of your clarity. Most people never get rich because they never take the time to define their financial principles. They treat money emotionally, erratically. They hoard it in fear. They waste it in impulse. They attract it inconsistently and lose it quickly. But the wealthy? They follow laws, not luck. They set standards. They respect systems. And those systems, once in place, do most of the heavy lifting. One of those laws is simple but overlooked. Wealth must be managed before it multiplies. In other words, you must prove yourself worthy of handling money before you are trusted with more. This is not mysticism, it's logic. If you cannot manage $1,000, you will not magically become wise with $100,000. If you panic at a $200 bill, you will collapse under a $20,000 opportunity. Most people never get rich because they wait to build financial discipline until they have wealth. But the order is reversed. Discipline creates wealth. Structure attracts prosperity. Systems sustain abundance. The habit of stewardship is the foundation. Budgeting, tracking, saving, investing, not from scarcity, but from clarity, from mastery, from the understanding that money is not a test of status, it's a test of order. And when you pass that test with the little you have, you open the gates to more. So how do you begin? Start by making money real. Not abstract, not emotional, but tangible. Look at your numbers. Track your spending. Know where every peso, every dollar is going, because money loves clarity. Most people never get rich because they live in fog. They don't know what they earn. They don't know what they owe. They don't know what they're building. They live in reaction, not in design. But the moment you begin to track, to organize, to see, you reclaim your power. You stop drifting. You begin directing. And over time, that direction becomes momentum. That momentum becomes wealth. It's not glamorous, but it's effective. It's not dramatic, but it's dependable. Wealth is not the result of a lottery ticket. It's the result of structure repeated daily, quietly, consistently, with respect. Another pillar of your financial philosophy must be value first, lifestyle second. This means you prioritize production over consumption. You invest in tools before toys. You build assets before aesthetics. You expand capacity before you elevate comfort. Most people never get rich because they reverse the order. They reward themselves before they've earned the reward. They upgrade the car before they've upgraded the character. But the wealthy? They delay. They reinvest. They multiply. Not because they're frugal, but because they understand. They know that every peso saved and reinvested in the early stages will echo for years. They know that compound growth is not just a financial concept, it's a philosophical discipline. The small things today become the big things tomorrow. And they live by that law day after day without applause. That's the difference. That's the edge. Here's another test. When you think of wealth, do you feel guilt? Do you feel tension? Do you feel unworthy? If so, you've discovered a subconscious block. And that block must be examined, not judged, not suppressed, but examined. Ask, where did I learn this? Who taught me this? And is it still serving me? Most people never get rich because they carry old scripts, childhood messages, cultural codes, internalized shame, but those codes can be rewritten, not easily, not instantly, but daily, through repetition, through new input, through intentional reprogramming. You can replace guilt with gratitude. You can replace shame with service. You can replace doubt with discipline. But you must decide. And once you do, everything begins to shift. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And wealth always follows internal change. Always. Let me speak directly to you. If you want to become wealthy, you must take full responsibility, not just for your actions, but for your philosophy. You must question everything. You must rebuild your framework from the ground up. You must create a system that works even when motivation fades, that holds even when pressure mounts, that grows even when the world doesn't notice. Because true wealth is not about having money, it's about becoming the kind of person who can sustain it. And that kind of person thinks differently, acts differently, believes differently. Most people never get rich because they never become rich internally. They seek external success while clinging to internal chaos. But you can change that today with one belief, with one principle, with one standard, repeated consistently until it becomes you. Most people never get rich because they don't understand the real source of wealth is not found in the economy, in inheritance, or even in hard work. It's found in thought. Your thoughts are the blueprint, the invisible architect of every dollar you earn, every opportunity you see, and every limitation you unknowingly obey. You see, thought is causative. It doesn't simply influence your life, it creates it. Everything you see around you, every building, every invention, every business began as a thought. One quiet idea in the mind of a human being who chose to believe it could become real? Most people never get rich because they never slow down long enough to choose their thoughts. They repeat mental patterns from childhood. They absorb the opinions of others. They mistake familiarity for truth. And so they live in a thought loop of scarcity, never realizing that what they accept in their mind is what they authorize in their life. Let me ask you, what thoughts dominate your mind each day? Are they thoughts of expansion or contraction, possibility or limitation, creation or complaint? Because your dominant thought becomes your internal command. It shapes your decisions, your posture, your tone of voice. It determines how you carry yourself, how you treat others, how you respond to challenge. It governs what you notice, what you filter, and what you dismiss. That's how powerful your thinking is. Most people never get rich because they never take control of this inner environment. They work harder, run faster, try more tactics, but they never pause to examine the seedbed of their results. They blame the fruit while ignoring the root. But if you want to become wealthy, you must think on purpose. You must become aware of what you're allowing to take root in your mind, and then you must replant. Here's the process. First, become aware. Notice the thoughts that arise automatically, the ones that whisper, you can't, you're not ready, this is too hard. Write them down. See them clearly. Name them. Then second, interrupt them. Don't let them pass unchallenged. Say out loud, that's not true. That's not me. That's old programming. And third, replace them. Choose a new thought. One rooted in your vision, your identity, your possibility. Say, I am capable. I am becoming. I am disciplined. I am creating wealth with clarity and purpose. Repeat this process daily, because reprogramming takes repetition. Your mind is not a light switch, it's a garden, and gardens take care, pruning, and time. But make no mistake, every day you do this work, you're building something powerful, something invisible now but inevitable later, and the world will feel it. Most people never get rich because they think thoughts are passive, but thoughts are active. They send signals, they emit energy, they become your frequency, and your frequency attracts matching experiences. That's not mysticism, it's magnetism. You've experienced this before. When you were deeply confident, opportunities seemed to appear. When you were insecure, even simple tasks felt hard. That's the law at work, the law of vibration, the law of resonance. Your thoughts create your state. Your state creates your behavior, and your behavior shapes your results. It's a chain, a sequence, and it all begins with thought. So if your financial life is not where you want it to be, don't start with budgets or tactics. Start with thought. Track it, challenge it, upgrade it, because until the root changes, the fruit cannot. Let me give you a foundational metaphor. Your mind is a thermostat, not a thermometer. A thermometer reacts to its environment. It measures what is, but a thermostat sets the environment. It dictates what will be. Most people never get rich because they live like thermometers. They adjust to circumstance. They react to the news. They lower their energy to match their peers. But the wealthy, they set the tone. They choose the temperature. They raise the standards in every room they enter. And it all begins in the mind. In the morning, in the mirror. They don't wait to feel ready. They decide to become ready. That's the power of thought. It's not about what happens to you, it's about what you allow to happen through you. And that shift from reactivity to authorship is the gateway to wealth. Now, this doesn't mean thought replaces action. It precedes it. It directs it. Most people never get rich because they act from confusion, from desperation, from fear. Their actions are scattered because their thoughts are scattered. But when your thinking is clear, your actions become strategic. You stop chasing everything. You stop doubting constantly. You begin to trust your path because your mind has been trained, aligned, calibrated to your vision. It's like tuning a radio. When you're off frequency, you get static. But when you're dialed in, when your thoughts match your goal, the signal becomes clear. You begin to receive the people, ideas, and opportunities that match your inner state. And suddenly what once felt impossible becomes inevitable. Not because the world changed, but because you did. This is why most people never get rich. They underestimate the mind. They ignore its power. They treat it like background noise instead of the control panel of their destiny. But you must do something different. You must honor your mind, guard it, sharpen it, challenge it, feed it with excellence, starve it of fear, speak to it with strength. Rehearse your vision daily, not as fantasy but as instruction. Say, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is where I'm going. Repeat it, affirm it, embody it, because the mind believes what it hears repeatedly with emotion. And when it believes, it begins to build. Let me close this part with a challenge. For the next 7 days, take total control of your thinking. No passive drifting, no mental laziness. Every time a thought enters your mind, ask, does this align with the wealth I'm building? If it does, keep it. If it doesn't, replace it. Don't argue. Don't negotiate. Just decide. Because in the end, wealth is not a number. It's not a location. It's not even a lifestyle. It's a mindset. A pattern of thought practiced so consistently that the outside world has no choice but to follow. Most people never get rich because they follow the world. But you will lead, and you will lead first in the invisible, in the realm of thought, because that's where all power begins. Most people never get rich because they never learn the art of alignment. They say one thing, think another, and do something entirely different. Their desires are at war with their beliefs. Their actions betray their intentions. They write goals but speak defeat. They dream of freedom but live in patterns of fear. And so the universe is confused. Life responds not to what we say we want, but to what we consistently are. Wealth, then, is not just about working harder. It's about becoming a coherent force. When your thoughts, words, actions, and identity all align with your vision, results become inevitable. That's the secret most people overlook. They try to get rich, but the truly wealthy, they become rich. Not by force, but by internal congruence. They embody success so deeply, so naturally, that money becomes a natural extension of who they are, not a pursuit, but a byproduct. Let me give you a simple test. Ask yourself, are my daily habits aligned with the future I say I want? Not once in a while, not when inspiration strikes, but every day. Are your thoughts aligned with belief? Are your words reinforcing confidence or reinforcing limitation? Is your posture, your tone, your schedule, your circle, all reflecting the identity of someone who is financially free? Most people never get rich because they compartmentalize. They act like one person in public, another in private, one mindset on Monday, another on Friday. But success doesn't come from fragments. It comes from integration. It's not about perfection, it's about consistency. Alignment means you walk, talk, move, and think from the identity you've chosen until it becomes your natural state. That is the path to unshakable wealth. That is how reality bends to your vision. Consider this. A jetliner does not take off without alignment. The runway, the coordinates, the instruments, they must all sync. If one element is off, the takeoff is delayed, or worse, aborted. Your mind is no different. It's a vehicle for your future, but it cannot ascend if the parts are misaligned. If your vision is clear but your habits are lazy, no lift. If your affirmations are strong but your associations are toxic, no lift. If your goals are bold but your environment is chaotic, no lift. Most people never get rich because they overlook this principle. They try to fly with unbalanced wings. They try to ascend while dragging emotional anchors. But wealth is altitude, and altitude requires alignment. Every part of your life must point in the same direction. That's not rigidity. That's integrity. That's power. And power is what creates results. Now let's make this practical. Start with one area of misalignment. Choose the most obvious one. Perhaps it's your environment, your physical space, your desk, your routine. Is it designed for clarity, for excellence, for creation? Or is it cluttered with distraction? Or maybe it's your language. Do you speak like someone building wealth? Or do your words leak doubt, sarcasm, and complaint? Maybe it's your circle, who you talk to, listen to, share your vision with. Are they building or draining, supporting or sabotaging? Alignment begins with awareness, and awareness is a superpower. Most people never get rich because they live in denial. They avoid the truth. They stay comfortable in the contradiction. But comfort is not a strategy. Clarity is. And clarity comes when you look at your life honestly, precisely, and start aligning every detail to the wealth you've decided to create. And don't think this alignment is just external. It's deeply internal. Your self-talk, your expectations, your identity scripts. If you say, I want to be rich, but deep down believe I'm not worthy, your results will obey the belief, not the wish. If you affirm abundance in the morning, then scroll scarcity all afternoon, you're sending mixed signals. But when you become fully aligned, internally and externally, life starts to move. People notice, doors open, synchronicities appear. Not because magic happened, but because you became magnetic. That's the reward of alignment. It's not about hustle, it's about harmony, and harmony produces results faster, smoother, and more sustainably than stress ever could. Here's what I want you to remember. You don't get what you want, you get what you are, and what you are is the composite of your habits, your standards, your energy, and your identity. If you are aligned with wealth, you attract wealth. If you are aligned with lack, you attract lack. It's not punishment, it's precision. Life reflects back the frequency you emit. Most people never get rich because they ignore this. They treat life like chaos when it's actually a mirror. But once you understand the mirror, you can begin to adjust the reflection, not by force, but by internal calibration. This is the work. This is the path. And it begins with a decision. I will no longer tolerate internal contradiction. I will align who I am with where I'm going, and I will become the kind of person wealth recognizes. So today, take inventory. Ask, where am I out of sync with the person I want to become? Then act. Not tomorrow, not next month. Now, make one change. Align one detail. Speak one truth. Say no to one distraction. Say yes to one habit. These micro-alignments compound. They create momentum. And momentum once built is unstoppable. That's how wealth begins. Not in the bank, but in the mind. In the home. In the mirror. In the 1,000 small decisions that silently declare, this is who I am now. Most people never get rich because they wait for evidence before they believe. But you will believe first. You will align first. And in doing so, you'll become the evidence.